Dear friend, we often only think about funerals when loss has already arrived. But if we take a moment, gently, mindfully, we may begin to see a funeral is not an ending. It is a sacred ritual of love, a final moment for us to express our deepest respect, to gently touch a life, through memories, through unsaid farewells, through a heartfelt gratitude that words can barely hold. And today, I invite you to see the funeral profession in Vietnam through a different lens. It is not a sorrowful trade. It is not merely about death. It is a deeply human profession, one that serves the most profound values within us: love, connection, compassion. Because every funeral, whether humble or grand, carries a story within it, a love left unspoken, a memory that lingers, and an entire life worthy of honor and remembrance. There are professions that do not shine brightly under the spotlight. They don't make headlines. They don't demand applause. But they touch the deepest, most tender parts of the human soul. The funeral profession is one of them. Today, I invite you to join me in reflecting on a quiet yet transformative journey. 25 years of growth and evolution in Vietnam's funeral industry. A journey that unfolded away from the limelight, but one that holds within it profound shifts. In culture, in society, and in how people come to face death itself. Let us turn back the clock to the years leading up to 2000. At that time, funerals in Vietnam were almost entirely managed by the family. There were no services, no professionals to guide or support. Everything was done based on word-of-mouth traditions, passed down by the elderly in the family or within the village. One person would go look for a coffin. Another would buy cloth to sew mourning garments. Someone else would prepare offerings for the ancestral altar, and so on. Each funeral was a labor of love, grief, and chaos. Loved ones juggled logistics, customs, rituals, while still overwhelmed by sorrow and loss. Funerals back then were a mosaic of folk beliefs: burning joss paper, hiring spirit mediums, choosing auspicious times. Village customs, relatives and neighbors volunteering their time and effort. Disorder and improvisation, a lack of structure, coordination, or consistency. There was no single person or entity taking full responsibility. No one stood in the role we now recognize as a devoted and compassionate funeral coordinator, someone who guides the family through loss with care, dignity, and humanity. Then came the sweeping wave of urbanization. Cities began to expand. Wide roads were built, and towering buildings gradually replaced rice fields and village ponds. People left their rural hometowns and moved to the city in search of a livelihood, beginning a life that was busier, more crowded, and increasingly disconnected. And amid that tide of rapid development, cemetery land started to draw more attention and significant investment. Someone who guides the family through loss with care, dignity, and humanity. From 2005 to 2010, major urban centers like Ho Chi Minh City gradually faced an undeniable reality. Available burial land was shrinking at an alarming rate. The duration of funeral ceremonies, once typically 3 to 5 days, was now shortened to just 1 to 3 days. Families were increasingly busy, with fewer members available to handle the responsibilities of a proper farewell, and most had little to no experience in managing funeral arrangements. Neighborhood ties had weakened. The once strong sense of community support had begun to fade. The grief of losing a loved one, already immense, was now compounded by the pressure of managing a funeral. The suffocating pace of city life, the scarcity of burial land, the skyrocketing costs of grave plots, and countless other urban constraints, all contributed to a new and pressing demand within society. There must be a new way to hold funerals. One that is simpler, more dignified, and less burdensome. There must be someone to take full responsibility, from the moment of passing until the loved one is laid to rest. And from that very need, a quiet yet significant turning point began to emerge. The first full-service funeral providers started to appear, like faint glimmers of light in a long, dark night. At first, it was just rental hearses. Then came services for funeral halls, floral arrangements, mourning garments, tents, tables, and chairs. Eventually, providers expanded to offer complete funeral decor, ceremonial music, and dedicated staff to support families throughout the visitation. And so on. Step by step, Vietnam's funeral industry began entering a phase of service-oriented transformation, a shift toward specialization that was both natural and inevitable. funerals were no longer just a family affair. They gradually became a part of the broader social service sector, deeply human and profoundly essential. Starting around 2015, we began to witness a significant leap forward in Vietnam's funeral industry. A growing number of professional funeral service providers emerged, with legal business status, well-trained personnel, transparent operational procedures, and a clear long-term vision for sustainable development. In the past, funeral professionals were mainly responsible for handling the logistics of the funeral itself. But today, their roles have expanded, becoming far more meaningful and holistic. They offer psychological support and funeral planning guidance to grieving families, helping them stay grounded during moments of intense emotional pain. They pay close attention to the emotional needs of the bereaved, providing care with empathy and deep respect for each family's personal grief. They assist with advanced planning, from choosing burial or cremation options to clearly outlining preferred rituals and service components requested by the family. An increasing number of providers now offer fully professional, full-service funeral packages, including legal consultation related to end-of-life matters, scheduling cremations or assisting families in selecting burial plots or cemetery projects for optimal convenience, preparing all funeral attire, ceremonial elements, and memorial spaces for the wake and visitation, organizing memorial services, and producing personalized remembrance videos to honor the life of the deceased. Everything is carried out with care, reverence, and a high level of personalization, ensuring that each farewell is as meaningful and dignified as the life it commemorates. The funeral profession is no longer just something that must be done when someone passes away. It has evolved into a truly human-centered service industry, rooted in spiritual values, ethical responsibility, and a modern approach to care. This is no longer a taboo or avoided line of work. It is now a recognized profession, one that is properly trained, professionally developed, and holds a respected place in society. Because behind every funeral is not merely a farewell. It is a journey to close a life's chapter, with dignity, with compassion, and with the deepest form of human respect and love. The COVID-19 pandemic was not only a global public health crisis, it was also a profound shock to the funeral industry, both worldwide and in Vietnam. Never before had humanity faced death on such a massive scale, and in such a short span of time. Large, traditional funerals, spanning several days, filled with rituals and gatherings, suddenly became impossible to hold under the constraints of lockdowns, distancing, and fear. In this context, the funeral industry was forced to adapt. And in the face of adversity, the pandemic became a powerful catalyst, accelerating both the standardization and modernization of funeral services. Funeral providers began implementing more detailed service protocols to shorten the time required for after-death procedures, from death registration to cremation scheduling. Virtual funerals emerged, allowing distant relatives and friends to attend via live stream and send condolences through online tribute videos. The entire funeral process became increasingly standardized, with measures in place to ensure hygiene, social distancing, and time efficiency. Professional service providers rapidly embraced digital transformation, including remote consultation via phone, email, or mobile apps. Predefined, standardized funeral service packages tailored to each family's needs. COVID-19 fundamentally changed how society views and approaches funerals. People no longer seek grand or elaborate ceremonies. Instead, they now prioritize thoughtful, time-efficient, and simplified funerals. Ones that are modest in form yet rich in meaning. As a result, funeral service providers could no longer operate the way they used to. They were compelled to evolve, to become more flexible, more structured, more professional, and in that sense, the pandemic, despite its pain, became a pivotal turning point that propelled the funeral industry forward. It marked the transition from a traditional field to a modern, systematized industry, one with clear standards and the capacity to operate under any circumstance. From that moment on, a funeral was no longer just a ritual. It became an essential service, one that blends spiritual meaning with operational precision, and one that deserves investment, advancement, and long-term development. From the year 2000 to today, now, in 2025, the transformation may not have been fast, but for Vietnam's funeral industry, it has been a courageous journey, overcoming hardship, breaking through stigma, and rising above challenges. to reach a place of professionalism and modernization. We believe this. A funeral is not merely a farewell. It is the final expression of love, the most beautiful way to say goodbye. And Vietnam's funeral industry is evolving, step by step, to truly become the guardian of life's final beauty. There are markets that are vast and full of potential, but because they are wrapped in silence, few ever truly notice them. The funeral industry is one of those. Vietnam is entering the fastest aging population phase in Asia. By 2025, it is estimated that between 500,000 to 600,000 people will pass away each year. This is not merely a number that reflects loss. It represents a funeral service market valued at over $1 billion annually. However, this market still operates within a fragmented structure. There is no nationally recognized leading brand yet. Competition is unfolding between two very different worlds. On one side, family-run models rooted in long-standing tradition. On the other, professional service providers striving to standardize every aspect of the process. But the majority still lack a clear and far-reaching vision, a unified standard of quality, and a structured training system for human resources. This is an untapped market, but its potential is knocking louder with each passing day. And what about the consumers? They are changing. They no longer seek elaborate or overly traditional rituals. They look for privacy, simplicity, personalization, and a sense of modern dignity. More and more families are choosing cremation over traditional burial, a simpler yet deeply meaningful choice. And even more notably, a growing number of families are now proactively planning for their own funerals, while they are still healthy and clear-minded. This marks a positive shift in perception toward a more modern and enlightened view of death. Funerals are no longer just for the departed. They are a human choice made by the living, to prepare for the most beautiful farewell possible. A society in transition, a new generation taking shape, and an industry once silent, now standing at the threshold of transformation. If we look closely, Vietnam's funeral industry reflects some of society's most profound questions. How do we say goodbye to those we love? Are we willing to prepare for our own farewell? And is death truly something we must avoid talking about? First, urbanization. Major cities are running out of cemetery land. This is driving cremation to become the dominant trend. As a result, there is a rising demand for columbariums, smart cemeteries, and modern memorial services designed to meet the needs of a changing society. Second, shifting mindsets. People are becoming increasingly open to funeral services. They no longer assume they must handle everything themselves. Instead, they are turning to solutions that offer professionalism, respect, and modernization. Third, technology is stepping in. From AI-powered memorials, to lifetime funeral insurance, to online platforms for ordering, payments, and live streaming, technology is transforming every aspect of how funerals are planned and experienced. But every transformation comes with barriers. The first challenge is societal mindset. Many Vietnamese people still shy away from discussing death. Funerals are often seen as unlucky topics. And as a result, the funeral profession has never truly received the recognition it deserves. Second, fragmented legal frameworks. Each province, each city, has its own set of regulations. The lack of a unified legal structure makes it difficult for businesses to scale and operate at a national level. Third, unstandardized workforce. There are no formal training institutions, no professional certification programs. An industry that demands kindness, emotional intelligence, and dignity is still lacking the right people to carry out its most meaningful work. By 2030, we are expected to witness unprecedented changes in the funeral industry. Cremation rates will surpass 70%, driving the development of multi-story columbariums and eco-friendly cemeteries. Funeral services will become fully standardized, from logistical support and digital payments to the management of memorial images and videos. Lifetime funeral insurance models will emerge, integrating healthcare, end-of-life planning, and family financial management. Digital remembrance will become the norm. Video wills, memory archives, and platforms for sharing stories and legacies of the departed. And by that time, we will no longer hold funerals just for the departed, but create a humane, meaningful space where the living can find closure through peace and acceptance. When people think of funerals, they often think of rituals, but in reality, it is a complex ecosystem. one that intersects culture, technology, education, and law. Let's take a look at the global map and ask ourselves, where does Vietnam stand in the journey toward professionalizing funeral services? Cremation, a form increasingly favored for its land-saving benefits, has reached 99% adoption in Japan, 95% in Taiwan, and approximately 57% in the United States. In Vietnam, cremation has just recently surpassed 70% in major cities such as Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. However, in rural areas, traditional burial practices still largely remain the norm. And what about technology? Japan has robotic funeral ceremonies. The United States offers online memorial platforms integrated with life insurance. Taiwan links QR codes on urns to tribute videos. Vietnam is only just beginning to enter the digital era. When it comes to workforce training, Japan has a National Funeral Service Academy. The United States requires professional licensing and certification. Taiwan has a mandatory training system in place. Vietnam still has no formal educational institutions dedicated to this profession. And when it comes to price transparency, a vital factor in building trust, Japan enforces legally mandated price listings. The United States is strictly regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. Taiwan has standardized pricing guidelines for each type of service. Vietnam still relies heavily on trust, and mostly word of mouth. From all of this, some might say Vietnam is 15 to 30 years behind. But I don't see it that way. Being behind doesn't mean being defeated. It can be an opportunity to build it right from the very beginning. We don't need to take the long road. We don't need to repeat the world's mistakes. Vietnam can leap forward if we have the courage to change and the compassion to begin with sincerity. Duc Thien Funeral Service. Funerals are a sacred calling, and those who serve must do so with heart, with truth, and with soul. You know, a funeral is not the end. It is the moment when a life touches eternity in the hearts of those who remain. If today we can begin to standardize the funeral industry, then we are not merely building a service sector. We are redefining how society honors life and how we say goodbye with kindness. If you are a young person, consider a new kind of career, a kind-hearted ferryman for life's final journey, a profession of emotion, of depth, of humanity. If you are an investor, see this industry not only through the lens of profit, but through compassion, vision, and a commitment to lasting integrity. And if you've ever lost someone you love, let Duc Thien Funeral Service help you honor that memory fully and beautifully.